there was a point where you had mentioned about like the differences between us are to be celebrated, and the sort of like new agey, like, oh, we're all like one thing. I feel like there can be a duality within, to like, yes, we are all one humanity if we're like drawing circles around or like expanding the boundaries that we can consider our in-group, that like, yes, we are all one humanity, and it doesn't mean that the differences between us are any more or less important, but that we should acknowledge that we are all one humanity, and that things would be worse off if we didn't treat each other and ourselves as such. And so like, I grew up listening to a lot of rebellious music, and also I think I told you at one point about the Venus Project. Fully automated luxury gay space communism, as the internet has kind of taken that idea, a post-scarcity type society. And so Jacques Fresco, the founder of the Venus Project, kind of instilled in me this idea that like war is the most wasteful thing that we have ever conceived. And so like, I think that for me, one of the reasons why I have that reducing the division question in there is because like the ultimate goal, or a ultimate goal, not the ultimate goal, I have many goals. A ultimate goal is to just end war. We're just wasting so much time and resources and life on killing each other for resources, the very resources that we're fighting over, that we're using to destroy each other. And so it's like, we could instead just not. And so it's like, yeah, we can be one and acknowledge our differences, but also kind of accept the fact that like, we are one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a part of the kind of trajectory of maturation that humanity is going to have to undertake. You know, is the learning to separate identity and worth in a way, even in the individual. Like, you know, your identity is not what gives you worth. You know what I mean? Your fact of existence is what gives you worth, in my opinion. You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of it has to do with the history of nationalism on this planet. And obviously the, you know, just where the different groups of proto-humans settled and secluded, really, more than anything. So I think that what our challenge now is learning to see the human identity as separate from the human cultural identity in a way, and understanding that one's cultural identity does not confer any worth whatsoever. But it also doesn't retract any worth. It doesn't take away whatsoever.
Right. I think that there's so much weight put on culture. Obviously, like the progressive agenda tends to like hyper value cultural differences necessarily, but like even just the concept of like cultural appropriation is so ridiculous to me, because like, how were those cultures refined into themselves to begin with?
Right.
And so it's like, the whole thing is an arc that we're all partaking in. It's not like there is no perfectly preserved specimen of a cultural idea,
right?
Because even that culture that you're describing is just a transient as well.
I think, and for me personally, because I don't necessarily agree with you when it comes to cultural appropriation, but the reason is because to me it's about the descendants of the colonizers continuing to take from the descendants of the colonized. That's where the issue is for me. I mean, I don't know. There was a long period of time where my own family, because I am a quarter Choctaw, my father is half, before that his mother, Lavina, was full blood. So like we've been here since they brought us to this state, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me, and there was, as recently as one of my uncles was beaten in school for speaking our language, So for me, it's about people who are the descendants of colonizers coming in and trying to steal the culture that the colonized were oppressed for and oppressed from, you know what I mean? We were not allowed to do our dances. We were not allowed to practice our religious, institutions and things like that. And so for me, it's about them having absolutely no right to come in and take that from people like me who actually do value the cultural identity in that sense. I mean, it is an important part of my life, because they and their ancestors did not go through the things we did that gave that stuff to value, because that stuff doesn't have intrinsic value, and it's not something that just happened or occurred.
Sure.
The worth that we attach to it is because of the suffering that our people have endured to earn that. That's I mean, to me, that's why, I mean, especially when it comes to like, a lot of indigenous things. I see white girls with dream catcher tattoos and things like that. Dream catchers are an Ojibwa spiritual tradition. There's not this concept of like Native American, for me, it's bullshit. It doesn't exist. The concept of Native American was invented to legitimize before European contact with this continent. It's designed to kind of frame the history, the pre-European history of the indigenous peoples here in what we now call America as American. You know what I mean? It's a false narrative to legitimize their claims to this place. So,
right.
Sorry, Jesus.
No, but like that's, and that's the distinction should be always intent. So like, do you intend to like, oh, I want a dreamcatcher tattoo because it's like, I think it's neat, right, versus like, there is a deep cultural understanding that is within this, and I admire and appreciate the complexities within and what that meaning brings to my life is, but there's no like committee in place to like decide whether or not someone's intent in their dreamcatcher tattoo is or isn't respectful to the original culture.
True.
And so like the copy pasted story that is like Dances with Wolves and The Last Samurai and all of the things where it's like a cultural outsider becomes one with a different culture.
Right.
Like those things need to happen or else like those cultures don't continue in some way. We need to acknowledge and appreciate the novelty of each other and our differences, which is kind of where this conversation began, is that like we need to be able to tap into each other's cultures without thinking that like you can't make a certain kind of food because it's disrespectful. It's like, it doesn't, I know that the point is to like appreciate and give value to the cultural touchstones of each of those identities, but again, there's no committee in place to like make a decision on every cultural thing that people are doing and determine whether or not this thing is good or this thing is bad. And like, it is a great deal of value to me to like disavow the colonizer within me.
Same.
And that's something that we can all do, and kind of just disavow this conqueror that has pummeled through our identities. But like the rest of it is like, I was born in Venezuela, but I have like no direct attachment necessarily. I came to the US when I turned 6.
Right.
And so like I'm Venezuelan, but like I speak conversational Spanish and I enjoy the food that my parents make and I can make some of it as well. There are certain types of music that I am more open to.
Mm-hmm.
And like those are the parts of my Venezuelan culture that like I can acknowledge. There's a whole wealth of Venezuelan history and stuff that I don't really know about and has never been like a huge focus of my life because it can change me or it can't, but like in the end I'm still in the United States right now. And so it's like I don't hold on to cultural identity necessarily because I don't have something to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a hybrid of cultural existence that even the place that I was born, I'm like kind of not welcome in because I can't go back. I don't have a passport. And like there's no way to like dig through paper records from Venezuela to like find a 6-year-old boy's identity. Right. So it's like I'm not okay in either space anyway. Mm. And that's a strange thing about the immigrant experience. Yeah. That I have nothing to hold on to except for my own experience. And so kind of because of that, everything is fair game. Sure. And so it's like on the way here, we were listening to Clipping, which is like a huge mishmash of like identities and musical styles that like have a lot of interesting history behind them too, to create something new and interesting. But like that's a part of my identity now, even if I don't necessarily take part in like 70s avant-garde music concrete or in like 90s hip-hop of the New York spaces. So like all of these things like contribute to something, and we're all kind of this, again, like melting pot of different ideas and culture, and I think that's a good thing. And so we can just accept that cultures are going to intertwine. We can just accept that cultures are going to mix, and that's something to celebrate.
Absolutely. I mean, and yeah, and that's going to happen, and I am glad for that. The only thing the only thing that I would really like to see, the only caveat I would really put that is I would like to see people giving basically each other's ancestors the credit for carrying those lines, those ways of being to this point. You know what I mean? That to me, there's something still special in that. You know, I know I talk about divorcing cultural identity from the concept of value and things, which, I mean, yes, but I still think, you know, it doesn't give you value, but you can still find value in it, if that makes sense. But I think that for me, a lot of it really is the individuals who often are, you know, appropriate, we'll say, the people who do it, if they could just acknowledge what's happening, I would be so much more okay with it.
Yeah.
That's you know, there's this pretend, especially New Agers are the worst. There's this thing where hippies try to convince me that it's okay for whites to have dreads because Vikings had dreads, and that's not true. Vikings had plaits. Plaits are completely different. They're nothing like dreads. They're braids. They're ornate braids. They're not matted. They're not twisted and rolled to keep their shape. They're not coated in, you know, earth to protect your scalp from the sun. They're not dreads. They're just not dreads. And so it's this false narrative where they're even going so far as to change the history that we know to fit their narrative so that they can just have a hairstyle they want. And like the people who have that hairstyle, it means something to them. And it doesn't have to mean something to everyone, and I get that. But I want them to acknowledge that it means something to the people they are stealing it from.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's all I really want.
Right. And that's where it goes back to intent, is that like we want to like be okay whenever, I don't know, like if a rap group samples some like traditional African music, even though they didn't grow up with that thing in their American life. They want to acknowledge that, like, hey, this is something that in some way is part of my lineage. And it's like, while they are not immediately descendants of that musical culture, for them to partake in it is acceptable because that's the intent. Or sometimes some different rap groups or rappers or whatever might use that just because it's like, oh, it sounds cool or something. And even the same people who like are quote unquote allowed to use the thing are also like not approaching it with a respectful intent necessarily. And that's just like, we don't have a committee. And I'm not saying that there should be a committee.
Oh, no.
That sounds awful.
That's a slippery slope.
But like, it's just difficult. And I feel like if we just kind of let go, it's probably better.
I mean, I would agree with that. I do still think individuals need to basically hold their friends accountable.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I think that's what, we don't need committees. We need individuals to hold one another accountable. I mean, that really goes for a lot of societies stuff. But, you know.
Tell me about the occult, because I know we can really get
what would you like to know?
I feel like I sort of communicate in ways that open up colloquial understanding to deeper understanding. So what is it that people colloquially think about the occult, and there are misconceptions about it? And so what actually is it, so that we don't have to be so afraid of it or something?
Well, a good place to start, a really good place to start, I think, would be to elucidate the difference. And this is something that really only people who are in it know about, as the distinction between the left-hand path and the right-hand path. That's when people hear about the occult and they think of like, blood sacrifices under full moons, and you know what I mean. Even it doesn't have to be that extreme. You know what I mean? It could be something less nefarious, like I'm not even gonna
witchcraft, putting a hex on someone or something like that.
Another thing, hex, another point of misunderstanding. Hex just means to change something. That's all. To hex something, that's all to hex really means. But even then, people have taken, because people are so afraid of the power of individuals who claim to have advanced power, that anything can become nefarious. And so even just the act of hexing, which, as I've said, is just to inflict change on something, has come to mean, throwing misfortune at someone or something like that. Right. And like, how do you throw misfortune? You don't. You convince them to give themselves misfortune. If you really want to curse someone, this is gonna go against the point I'm trying to make. But if you really, if you really want to curse someone, convince them that they are cursed, and then they curse themselves for you. That's how that kind of magic really works. But anyway,
that's the power of it.
Yeah,
and that's kind of through our conversations, and like how my expanded understanding of it is that like it's real magic, but it's not really magic
right.
in the material sense.
Well, yeah. But a lot of that has to even people's conception of what real magic versus like not real magic has to do a lot with the allegories we used to occultists used to communicate with one another in olden times. You know what I mean? There's I'm so sorry, I can't remember the name, but there was a Spanish alchemist who said once, "Woe to the seeker who takes literally the rambling allegories of the alchemists, for such a one will never enter the inner sanctum of truth." And that's really the heart of it. You know what I mean? It's that this is all metaphor, and it's always been. And the people who do it know that, but the people who don't, they only hear the words of the analogies and they take them literally, and they become frightening, because consciousness is a bizarre and complicated and grotesque thing. And so naturally, some of the analogies we concoct to relate its nature to one another, they're gonna also be those things. So God, sorry, what I was gonna say about the left-hand path, right-hand path. The left-hand path is the path of fulfillment magic, wish fulfillment, basically, which is really firmly planted in the hand wavy woo side of things, if you ask me. I know people, I mean, there are things, there was a period of time in my own life where I was devoted more to the left-hand path of things. I wanted to be charismatic. I wanted to be influential. I never wanted to be powerful because I always understood that power has consequences that it's just not worth it. Influence is what I wanted because influence rules power. You know what I mean? Really. So back when I was that type of practitioner, that's what I was interested in. But it's about sacrificing everything aside from what you want to get what you want. That's what the left-hand path is about. And that's the one that should scare people, because honestly, the people that think they're capable of doing things like making sacrifices to bring about changes and things like that, capable of like killing someone's crops, to use a dated reference here. Nobody does that anymore anyway, sorry. Your neighbor killed your cattle, 1800s type of shit, whatever. The people who believe that they can do that stuff are the ones that are mentally unstable enough to try to harm others to get the job done. You know what I mean? So, as usual, it's not magic that people should be afraid of. It's people with undiagnosed mental illness practicing magic that people should be afraid of.
Sure.
The right-hand path, on particular, in the other hand, sorry, that's the left-hand path, is the kind of fulfillment. The right-hand path is all about personal development, personal growth. It's about nurturing your surroundings in such a way that produces the things, the effects you would like to see, which, if you're a right-hand practitioner, probably have more to do with emotional intelligence, communicative capacity, and organizational ability, really, more than anything, There's still, even within the occult community, there's a lot of disagreement as far as how this stuff actually works. There's a general consensus that it does, which is kind of, that's kind of, I don't know. It's funny to me. It's funny to me having been in the occult world for so long, but it's really, it's like make it work and then figure out how. That's kind of, that's what a lot of magicians do. It's different. It's a little different for me because I'm working on something so concrete when it comes to the programming and the numbers and things,
Sure.
I'm using it for direct applications. But there's most people think it's kind of the psychological model. A lot of the majority of people think it's like you make changes in your own consciousness that then affect your behavior, that bring about the ends you're seeking. So that's one way. I'm a little weirder than that as far as why I think it actually works. It's because I think that there's only one mind in this entire physical cosmos. I think that all of space-time is just a single consciousness, in development as it goes, more or less. And I think that the things that I think are the things I desire are actually the things that in some cases are bound for me regardless. You know what I mean? It's the kind of, is there free will thing, a free will. And that's another thing too, another fun thing that a lot of other occultists get onto me about, is trying to balance the concept of free will with, or the concept of free will not existing with the act of being an occultist.
Yes.
That's something that's a lot of people have a hard time reconciling.
It's very difficult to, because I don't believe in free will either, and so it's like it's very difficult to explain or even just communicate in such a way that is outside of free will grounded communication. And so like even just communicating intent can be a tricky thing to like, oh, well, if you don't believe in free will, then it's like, yes, but also like, oh, I got up and grabbed a bottle of water to drink. And it's like, to communicate it in non-free will terms, it's like the body indicated to the brain that it required refilling of liquids. And so the body... I was about to say made the decision. It's like, no, it didn't. But it's like
ambulated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Went to obtain water. So it's like language is already so grounded in that form of communication. It's very difficult to then ground everything else outside of that. And so it's like, instead, yes, we make decisions, but not in the way that it seems. It's hard.
The concept, you've heard the term true will. Have you heard this?
I haven't.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, in regard to occult thought, the true will is discovering and enacting one's true will, capital T, capital W, as he spells it, is the ultimate goal of Thelema, which is the philosophical system that Aleister Crowley created. Their whole thing, they say that our method is science, our aim is religion. That's kind of how they sum up. That's how they describe what Thelema is. But in Thelema, there's this thing called the Holy Guardian, the Holy Guardian Angel. And the first period of like ritual operation, basically, you every morning you arise early, you meditate, you go through a series of like mental and physical and emotional, spiritual exercises, whatever you want to say. You get warmed up, and then you watch your conduct carefully over the course of like a few months period, or up to a couple of years' time, depending on how long the ritual takes. But you go through all this stuff, this kind of purification and refining process, and then at the end of it, you're supposed to be granted what's called the conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel. And at that point, the Holy Guardian Angel, which is kind of like, it's like your most effective iteration, I guess. The most effective iteration of yourself you're capable of conceptualizing. You have a conversation with that piece of yourself, and it's supposed to give you or unveil to you your true will, which is kind of, the true will is kind of the reconciliation of the concepts of no free will versus agency. It's the idea that once you discover your true will, if you enact it, you are where you are meant to be, doing what you are meant to be doing. It's what have my experiences best conditioned me to do, And so for me, wandering through the library, spending all my times in books, finding the occult the occult encyclopedia set when I was 14 years old in the public library section, that's where a lot of this changed for me. All those little things in my experience have kind of put me in the trajectory to be what I'm becoming. And that's what the true will really is. You know what I mean? It's understanding the connection between the things you've experienced and the things you will commit to, and understanding that's an unbroken line. That's a single phenomenon manifesting itself in two different ways. And that phenomena is your true will. That's the point where agency and the absence of free will kind of meet. You know what I mean?
It's so funny that like so many people like get turned off by like some of the terminology that that's why like woo is so like scary to materialists, because like when you say like, oh, ritual and meditation and all this sort of stuff, it's like, oh, well, that's just crazy magical thinking type stuff. But it's like, no, what is a ritual? What is meditation? And it's literally just like being within yourself and like having a list of things that you put intent into so that you can then behave in a certain way. Those are real material things that you are physically doing that then reshape your behavior in the future. But it's not magic, but it is magic.
Oh, and I hear that often, actually, that kind of sentiment, and really what it comes down to is the misunderstanding about what magic is, which I know you've mentioned, even just while we've been here today. But that's a lot of what it is. When people hear magic, they associate it with stage magic, which is technically referred to as conjuration, and that's what it's actually called. Coin conjuring. If you ever see people doing magic with coins, it's called coin conjuring. That kind of magic to begin with is called conjuring. That's what it was one of many schools, and it is illusion. That stuff was illusion. That was the point of it. It was about training one's dexterity and learning how to manage people's perceptions. There are actual occult lessons hidden in stage magic, and that's something a lot of people still aren't really comfortable talking about. A lot of stage magicians kind of try and distance themselves from because they want to be like a legitimate entertainment venue, but we're like standing there standing behind the cult glass going, look at me, brother, because they've always been us. They've always been a part of our culture as magicians. But people associate that kind of pageantry and that illusion. They associate all of magic with that, and that's just one application of what we do. Or they associate it with like witches and that sort of stuff. That it's like, well, even the stigma against boiling pot for make the thing and hexes, like we mentioned earlier. But I mean, in an era where in an age where sanitation was not a common thing, of course, half crazed women in the middle of nowhere putting strange things in pots. Of course, it seemed like magic to them.
Mm-hmm.
You could just be making a nutritious stew to help protect you from the wintertime. You know what I mean? The stigma against witches is heavily tied into the oppression of the feminine archetype, and really just women, period, throughout society, throughout most of human history, all of human history.
Yeah.
So really, that's where the majority of that comes from. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely cultural weights attached to the words that magic uses to describe itself that I do think it keeps, at a certain point, keeps people from having access to it. And now at a point in our history where the world was a little bit smaller and not quite so densely packed, that was advantageous because it gave people of cunning something to look forward to, something to work through, to be able to interpret the analogies correctly and things. And it also kind of helped keep the foolish from mocking what was actually going on. You know, I mean, you tell people that you're, trying to pull a manticore out of thin air. We'll say, a manticore means something very specifically in occult terms. I won't get into that too much now, but I'm just saying, like, you tell someone you're conjuring a manticore, they'll just look like, oh, you're crazy. You know what I mean? They'll write you off. But after they've written you off, you are left in peace to do your work. You know what I'm saying? So like there was a time when it was advantageous, but now just the speeds of our communication and the information density, which arguably is lowering as we go. But anyway, the signal to noise ratio is fucked. Sorry. As we go, it's becoming less and less of an advantage. In fact, becoming a disadvantage over time. And I think that for the occult to survive, it's gonna take a lot of individuals clearly describing what they're doing to the public on the good faith that the public will try to understand. That's what it's going to take for the occult to survive.
Good luck.
Thanks. Thank you.
Because, that's the difficult thing is that, persecution comes much more easily nowadays. It's very easy to destroy someone nowadays. So,
That's very true.
And so, it's difficult, especially when these things are actually effective. And so it's such a strange, paradox in American culture that we simultaneously, the cultural we, not the me we, but we simultaneously take everything so literally and have a lot of poetry that is meaningless. And we do this all the time with everything. And I don't know, the fact that schools would rather teach math and science and not music and art, even though, like we said before, it's all the same thing. But also, I heard a story about a mother who had two kids who were going to Catholic school. She had an OnlyFans and was making sexual content, and basically the mob of the Catholic school angrily used their influence to expel the two kids from Catholic school, which is such a strange and stupid and silly thing. It would be funny were it not so sad, but there's a lot of magical thinking in that, in some way this powerful being of this woman making sexual content is going to use her magic on first her kids and then to influence our kids, and therefore they must be pushed out of our community.
Right.
But also magic isn't real and you have to study math and science instead of music and art.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's a time-honored tradition in the Christian church is the various denominations of refusing to see themselves as an integral part of the occult current, but they always have been. I mean, for God's sake, they're eating flesh and drinking blood.
Yeah.
I mean,
Catholics and Lutherans,
right,
not the rest.
Okay, yeah, but all of them partake in ritual. All of them. There's sacred ceremonial vestments. There is a church.
A holy physical place.
Yeah. I mean, it's just all the trappings are there, and they still refuse them to see themselves as a part of it. But I mean, that's part of kind of what makes Christianity is the whole have no other gods before me, that whole thing. Meanwhile, Yahweh was a Canaanite deity of storms and warfare. So, anyway, sorry.
There's a lot of war in the Bible.
Right. No, I know. It's interesting to me that like the Christian God, like, used to be the Canaanite god. But there's such this assertion of dominance of one mythology over another in that region. It's just, I mean, one of the things that blows my mind about Christianity. Although the Crusades had the Crusades not happen, I think Christianity might have stood a chance of actually doing something good on this planet. But the Crusades happened, so we have to like come up with something else to do.
Right? Yeah. Well, the manifest destiny thinking came long before America and was Eden.
It's not just that; it's the absolute extermination of the occult content of the occult current from Christianity, the Gnostic current. I mean, Christians had an occult sect. They were the Gnostics. One of the most famous sects was called the Brethren of the Holy Spirit, and they did things like running soup kitchens and like shelters and things like that. And they were absolutely stamped out of existence because the crown perceived them to be a threat. You know what I mean? So there's I feel about Christianity the way I feel about a lot of things descended from Western Europe, is that they destroyed aspects of their own culture, and now it's like they don't feel like anyone has a right to those pieces of their own culture either. You know what I mean? It's like they, I don't know. I'm sorry.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not even just within cultures, but it's like within people as well. And so like the concept of marriage as well is like something that like you own a woman so that she can only reproduce with you, and it's like used to just like make family ties so that we can perpetuate the monarchy. But like it's not like
arguably the least efficient familial system, just by the way.
Sure. But it's like now we've gotten rid of the utility of marriage, and now it's just like a cultural thing that it's like, well, one, let me acknowledge the elephant that is that I am married, but like I don't own my wife and she doesn't own me, but we partook in a ritual to show our love for each other, and that is something special, and I value that. But it doesn't mean that I have ownership of her, right. or that she has ownership of me. But like that sort of conceptual thing is like, we killed all of the purpose of marriage and only kept the like shitty parts. And so now we're just using it to like abuse our wives. and in every other aspect, but that's like one of the more secular ones that's like we still do this, even though like probably a lot of people that get married don't even really know why anymore.
Because it's expected of them. I've known some people, I'm not going to name any names here, but I've known some people who kind of expressed that to me before the point that they actually got married. Of course, after, I mean, there certain things happen in the brain, and it doesn't matter why you did it anymore because you've done it, and the changes begin to take place. But beforehand, though, I've known some people who've expressed to me like, I don't really know. Like, is this what I want? You know what I mean? It gets reduced to like cold feet, but I think that really we as a society might benefit from like actually taking those moments and like scrutinizing them a little bit more. Okay, what cultural institutions are we carrying forward into the future with us, and like who do those cultural institutions actually serve? You know what I mean? I think that's an important question. I also noticed that. Sorry, it occurs to me. I also noticed that the majority of cultures on Earth that use marriage as a form of ownership to repress the women in their society, it almost exclusively evolves from cultures that took to raising cattle and livestock.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of indigenous cultures are matriarchies. The Choctaws, my own people, we were a matriarchy before the Europeans showed up, and we never, you know what I mean. It's only the people who like raise goats and cows and sheep, the people who take to the cultural notion that they are capable of owning another living thing in the first place. You know, because Choctaws don't have that. We don't own a goddamn thing. We're on this land. This land takes care of us, and so we try to do our best to return the favor. You know what I mean? It's the cultural perspectives are completely different. But like, there's not even room in the Choctaw thinking that we didn't. Then some are nowadays. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of garbage Choctaw men, and I see you, and I don't appreciate what you're doing. But you know, we weren't there. Of course, there's always scoundrels. But like, marriage wasn't ownership until the Europeans got here. You know what I mean? Sorry to single out the Europeans again. I know some very fine European individuals.
I'm not sorry about singling out the Europeans.
It's only the real Europeans I know that I'm afraid of offending. The people from France, the people from Ireland.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Y'all are good people. I'm talking about, you know, the ones y'all sent over aren't doing so hot.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, while I am in some part indigenous to the Americas, right. A large proportion of my genes come from Europe, because who the hell wasn't colonized, you know? And so, like, again, kind of going back to the idea of like killing the colonizer within you, and all of the ideas that come from that sort of conquistador thinking and letting go of that and just embracing everyone and who they are and what they can be. So going further into the occult, I guess, sort of explaining more of the misconceptions. What is a ritual? What is a artifact? What are these things that, like, I feel like these are concepts that people can actually get a lot of value from if they understood them better, rather than being so disavowed to them that they like would never allow themselves to follow that train of thought.
I gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I would agree that there's a lot of benefit to be had. I mean, I used to be much more preachy than I am now, even if you can believe that, about the occult. I used to think, same with psychedelics, I used to think that they were for absolutely everyone and would tell everyone who had the chance to get in there and try it. But I'm not quite so gung-ho nowadays, but there's still a lot of people that I think would gain a lot of benefit from it. So you asked... we'll just go with the two you named to start it out here. What is a ritual? What is an artifact?
Yeah.
You mean,
or a talisman or whatever?
Okay. Well, those are all different things.
No, I know.
Sorry.
They're different words, making them different.
Yeah. Okay, so gonna approach the what is a ritual question like this. So, hold on here. We'll just take a look outside real quick. Okay, yeah. This thing you have circled around your tree out front, right? The earth inside of that circle is still a part of your yard, but that circle of your yard is devoted to that tree, right?
Yes.
This is what rituals are to your time.
Yeah.
There is the space that you have available, and then there is the ways in which you encapsulate and specialize your use of time. And that's really what a ritual is. It's you approach it with a consistent set of terms for understanding what you're doing. Yeah. There's the repetition of it is an aspect. A buddy of mine, he used to say that right makes rote all the time, which is honestly, it's still one of the most elegant explorations for what a ritual is that I've ever heard. It's the things that you do with your time most often you are going to become better at. It's that basic, it's a basic understanding. It's happened actually before time and again that I've explained to people what rituals really are, and they're like, oh really? That's it?
Yeah.
That's it, because it's things that we already know to exist.
Yeah.
And it's just explorations of the potentials inside those concepts.
Yeah.
That's where the occult really takes flight. It's things that you're familiar with. It's just looking a little deeper into them. So with something like a ritual, it's about, okay, you brushing your teeth is a ritual. You know what I mean? Having a cup of coffee when you wake up, that's a ritual. Driving to work every day, going to work every day, that's a ritual for conjuring wealth into your life. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm being literal. I'm not being snarky here. These are all
concerts are musical rituals. It's
collective effervescence.
Perhaps occult in some ways.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Yes. Yeah. I mean, and I did. I did also happen. I went to school for sociology. I said when I was in Tulsa, that's what I was there for. And so studying ritual, like I was already versed in the occult before I got there. So the professors I had, they seemed to appreciate the perspective I was able to contribute, because like I got that's ritual. You know what I mean? When they introduced me to Goffman and the concept of collective effervescence and the creation of totems and things, I just said, oh my God, these are the words I've been looking for. You know, so there's things we're aware of. It's about, as a magician, so it's about understanding, for one, what rituals are, which is anything you do often. Really, that's it. But for a magician, it comes, and there's a point where you stop just trying to be able to keep a ritual. Once you can actually establish a habit, that's like a baseline skill. But after that point, you have to figure out, okay, what am I actually going to spend my time on? Because you gain access to the understanding that, okay, the things I spend my time on, I get better at, or those parts of me develop. And so there's something that's almost there's something intimate about the way the relationship with oneself changes once you learn what a ritual actually is. You know what I mean? Because it makes your time more valuable to you in a way. So that's what a ritual is.
Yeah.
Just using your time in a structured way regularly with intent.
Yeah. And then I was using the examples of artifact, talisman. Yes, they're different things, but like items that have significance in some form of value that we put into them.
Right. What's the question here?
Right. Well, what is?
Oh, okay. Yeah. What are they? Yeah. I use so many analogies, and I feel so bad if there's any people on the
great way of learning things.
Yeah, it is. But I've had in the past, I've had friends who were on the autism spectrum who were interested in this stuff too. And let me tell you, getting past my own barriers to be able to communicate with them was a nightmare. It's hard to do. It's hard to talk about the occult without using analogy, because the very nature of the occult directly addresses analogy. Yeah. So it's hard to do sometimes. I've still managed to. I mean, there are things that can be talked about in concrete terms. I'm just not particularly good at it. So, let's see. All right. In order to kind of explain what those are, I guess, like enchanted objects, enchanted items kind of thing we'll go with to go with RPG terms here. I use them often. You'd be surprised how handy of a tool our RPG lingo is for explaining the occult to people.
What is RGB, by the way?
What?
What is RGB?
RPG.
Oh, RPG. Sorry.
Role-playing games. Oh my God.
Misheard.
Yeah, role-playing games. Sorry.
Yeah.
Enchanted items, right? Okay, so the ego is an enchanted item. The ego is the enchanted item that the self uses to persevere in spite of its own nothingness, I guess we'll say. The ego is that object which brings it into being, because it's a focal point for its activities. This seems like a digression, but I swear to God, it's not. If anyone. So if you ever go to a mall, if anyone goes to fucking malls anymore,
right?
Don't.
Yeah.
It's been years, but I remember the kiosk, the you are here kiosk. You know, the ego is a you are here sticker. You know what I mean? It exists purely to give a point of reference. Yeah, in the way giving a point of reference is the intention that you encode into the ego over the course of involving it in your experiences. By using the ego regularly, it develops. This is basically what makes an enchanted item as well. Yeah. It's the regular, just like the ritual is, using your time in a structured manner regularly with intent. The artifacts, the implements in a ritual, the items you're using to accomplish the ritual would be called the implements or the weapons. That's just what they're called. But those accumulate the mental consequence, the mental and emotional consequence of the rituals undertaken, basically. So whereas the ritual is like the regular period of time used to express, the artifact is the concrescence, I guess, of the changes you oh god, this is all
right
sliding. Sorry.
But I always use the example of like a wedding ring is charged with your energy because you have taken part in a ritual that gives it power and meaning. And so any other ring that you might buy from any random, like if you go to Forever 21, pay $3 for like a ring, that won't have the same value nor power nor energy. I'm using these words intentionally. That a wedding ring will, regardless of what its actual value is, whether you spent $3,000 on it or like 50. It still has more of your energy than any other thing would.
What distinguishes your energy from the energy surrounding you? What makes no? I'm serious. This is for me. This is delving into kind of the side of the occult that I appreciate, which is theory. I love it. But really, what makes an individual's energy more potent than the energy that surrounds them?
Because of my ego, I guess. Like I am the one who like considers this to be my energy in it. Okay. And so it's like, it's my wedding ring is not an important item to anyone else.
Right.
And so like, that's not transferable energy necessarily because it's, there are ways of transferring it, but that's not immediately transferable as money might be, but like I'm still unwilling to part from my wedding ring if you offer me any amount of money. And so like
so what confers its value is the fact that it can't be communicated in a way?
In a way, sure.
Is that not bizarre? I'm sorry, I'm just taking a second. That's really unusual, but I mean, you're right though. I think that's absolutely what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
is that what do you have? What makes my power, or your power, or whatever, is what am I capable of giving away? You know what I mean? That's how I distinguish it a lot. Good God.
Yeah.
Sorry. I do have some language processing issues, so kind of trying to keep it together. What was I saying? I'm sorry.
Well, actually, just to your point about transferring of energy is something that like I had sort of said as a side note that like there are ways of transferring that energy and sort of like you can spend time with someone else and communicate that like, oh, this is something that is very special to me. And you can sort of relay to them that like this item does have value, and maybe over time you can convince them that it does have value. That's kind of what con men do, but in a negative way. But like in a way, there's a magic, a thing that's happening whenever a con artist is selling you a shitty car.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's glamour. That's one of the big seven. Illusion, whatever. So
yeah.
Even in that instance, though, even in the instance where you take the time and you invest your energy into convincing the other individual that the ring has worth, it's still...
It's not the same.
Yeah, it's like meta worth almost.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like it's only worth something to them because it's worth something to you, and they value you, so they value it. You know what I mean? Or they value your connection to it. Even then, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So I don't think it really can be transferred. It's again part of what I was getting at. It's what do I have the ability to actually give away? What can I make use of? You know what I mean? And it's always gonna whether or not you take the time to convince someone that this ring possesses that energy and it's has worth or whatever. They still have to okay that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a way, it's not your energy. They are agreeing to contribute their energy to your own, to the vector you are kind of supplying yours in, which is actually it's another. I mean that's that's group ritual right there. That's a working definition for group ritual. It's when someone consents to contributing their consciousness to a stated intention in common. You know what I mean? That's a group ritual, which is way different in terms of application from personal ritual. You know, it's very different, very different. I don't do group rituals often at all because it's really difficult to organize. It's really hard
because everyone has to be on the same terms.
Yeah, like completely. Like imagine. Okay, so if you've ever seen like philosophy students hang out or something, it's like that but worse. Because there's gonna be like a 4 to 5 hour period before you even start designing the ritual. You have to make sure, absolutely sure, that everyone's terms mean the same thing. That when I say these words, they mean what you hear. You know what I mean? It's a lot of work.
It was the same thing with like legal contracts, actually. The first several pages of a contract, depending on like the gravity of it, are just devoted to defining terms. To be like, when we refer to this, it means this and only this, and we can also shorten it to this, and that's every other instance that it occurs in this contract, it means this. Okay. Now the next word. It's just like every single thing. And that's why like lawyers spend so much time in school, because they're, in a way, they're also unpacking the literature of like, these words have meaning and they have an effect on the real world. Lawyers are occult practitioners of a really shitty system that we made.
It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But yeah, corporate magic is actually its own thing, and there's like whole schools devoted to, I mean, not literally, you know what I mean? If there are, I want to meet you people. But, you know, there's entire schools of thought devoted to corporate magic in and of itself, which, you know, some lawyers, branding, obviously. If branding's not black magic, I don't know what the fuck is. You know what I mean, really. That's pure left-hand path. That is pure left-hand path.
Yeah.
So if anyone... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. I do have a question about why is one left hand and right hand? There are, like, again, connotations associated with what the right hand means, what the left hand means. And it's like, me being left-handed is like, hey, wait a second. Like, you know,
I am too.
I find the energy surrounding this weird. So why is left hand and right hand?
I'm left-handed too. But also it's entirely descended from the Judeo-Christian paradigms, to be honest. I mean, it's the Judeo-Christian influence on really John Dee, John Dee's influence on Aleister Crowley, Aleister Crowley's influence on the rest of the occult world to present. So honestly, it's entirely inherited from the although even in the Bible, all the judges were left-handed. I'm just saying. And actually the reason for that stems from Judaic mysticism, Kabbalah, which is, you know, the Semitic, not Semitic, sorry, the Judaic occult current, I guess.
Is it Hasidic?
No. The Hasids are a specific type of Kabbalah. Okay. There's lots of different types of Kabbalah. Merkabah is one of the most interesting to me because their path to enlightenment is what they term deriving the measurements of the body of God. It's an interesting one. They're one of the kind of geometry sects, but I mean there's a lot of really complicated geometric objects hidden inside of the numerical relationships of the Aleph Bet itself. So I mean Judaism is brimming with magic, absolutely fucking brimming with magic. Sorry. But yeah, the left hand and the right hand, that's derives from the Kabbalist relationship between Chesed and Gevurah, which are mercy and judgment. Left hand being the judgment hand. You know.
Sure. Okay. So. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder if so in of course to talk about all these grandiose things and then make an analogy to video games in Jade Empire. Did you ever play Jade Empire? It was a BioWare game back when BioWare still made good RPGs.
Gotcha.
The like good and evil paths or open hand and closed fist.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I feel like that's a more apt comparison of like punching someone versus like the hand being open, so you can either like give with the open hand or at least smack someone with more precision at least.
Yeah, I dig it. Hearing the open and closed hand makes me think of there's a concept in Buddhism of the 5 skandhas, and the skandhas are skandhas. I'm sorry, really fucking up the pronunciation. My bad. Skandhas. Say it yourself if you want. There's this notion they're the 5 kind of illusory constructs that keep individuals identifying with their experiential physical selves. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But they're likened to the hand, because there's this idea that when the fist is closed, it's these things. There's mental constructs and the sensory perception, or the sensory field and its attendant perceptions. Mm-hmm. There's these 5 different things that compose the illusory self. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And there's this idea that once you understand that these processes are just that, only processes, that it's the opening of the hand and the self ceases to be. That's good. So when you said the open fist, closed fist, that's what made me think of. But
yeah.
Those don't necessarily relate to left hand, right hand. So I might have just undermined my own point. But whatever.
But it is, like with everything, analogy by which we can make some other form of relation.
Let's go with it.
Yeah. So I guess to close off, where would you suggest that people begin if they are interested in thinking in this way?
I'm trying to think of a place I can send people that won't suck, because there's a lot of as I mentioned earlier, the signal to noise ratio is fucked, and that's true in a lot of different cultural venues, especially in the occult. So definitely not any of the Facebook groups. I'll be completely honest. Don't even waste your time. If you join any Facebook groups about the occult, the only reason you should be there is to pilfer their files. The files. A lot of people still don't know that there's file storage or whatever in Facebook groups. But if you do join any of them, that's the only reason to be there, is they're going to have good books. Don't waste any time on the discussions. If you would like to get in touch with and honestly, they're a few years past their prime. It's difficult because there's not really any magical organizations that are like at the forefront of operations right now. There's the last major kind of revival we had was the DKMU, and the DKMU is still around. They're present. They have you can seek them out on Discord. There's a Reddit as well. There's it's DKMU. It stands for Domukeo and Marauder Underground. And they were 2 occult organizations that joined forces in the early 2000s to become a single thing. There was concurrent with the development of a god form named Ellis, but that's a whole different thing. But anyway, the DKMU is a good place to start. Otherwise, man, just read as much as you can. That's Baudrillard, Mnemosyne is a good book for starting in.
Should people start with Aleister Crowley or
no?
No
one should ever start. The thing about Aleister Crowley is he had a career. I mean, he was a accomplished academic mathematician, cryptographer, all of this by the time he even started to compose the Lema. You know what I mean? So it requires quite a bit of background in higher mathematics and comparative religion to be able to understand anything he was saying with any clarity, to be honest. The Soldier and the Hunchback. There was one essay he did that you don't really need any primer for. It's called The Soldier and the Hunchback, and it's about the relationship between wonder and curiosity as a driving force. I would recommend that. Now that I think about it, I would absolutely recommend that. So yeah, if you can find The Soldier and the Hunchback, maybe don't start there, but stop out there,
Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Absolutely.
Where can we find you and your things once again?
Slight Angel Scribe on Instagram, all one word. I haven't posted in a while, but I got some new content planned coming up.
Everyone is supposed to say big things coming soon.
Oh yeah,
regarding social media.
Big things coming soon. Sorry.
Right. Well, it's just like everyone is supposed to pretend that big things are coming soon, right. Regardless of if any big things are actually coming soon.
See, the thing about me is that they are, but I don't really give a fuck if anyone's there to notice them. If you are, that's amazing, but I will still get fulfillment out of them otherwise. Yeah. So
it's for you first.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Again, thank you so much. I'm Santiago Ramones.
I'm Joseph Arthur Clark.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music. Bloom is available now, streaming everywhere. Put it on in the background or show it to your friends so you can all enjoy it together. You can also buy it on Bandcamp and get bonus content so you can sit alone in the dark with your headphones on and listen to the album in its entirety while reading and looking at the bonus content. I also make music with Power Cycle, an experimental electronic trio. Our first completely improvised album, Too Many Damn Cables, is streaming everywhere. To support this podcast, leave reviews, comments, tell your friends about it, and buy my music, because by supporting me, you're supporting the podcast. I always end the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.